Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Reign of Troy Radio, episode 447, coming to you on Wednesday, September 21st. Of course, it is the 21st night of September, and I could go into those lyrics, but I'm not. As always, we're going to look forward to USC's game on Saturday. USC and Oregon State locking horns up at Reser Stadium in Corvallis. We're going to take your questions, preview the game, and so much more. As always, feel free to follow us on social media. We're at Reign of Troy on Twitter and Facebook. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, but most importantly, right here on YouTube if you're watching us live. Be sure to click the subscribe button and also like the stream. Helps grow the show tremendously. Our email address, of course, is reignoftroy@fansided.com. I'm your host, Michael Castillo. You can follow me on Twitter at MichaelCastFS. And I'm joined along with my wonderful co-host, Penguin of Twitter on Twitter. Penguin of Twitter on Twitter. Penguin of Troy on Twitter, Elisa Deratola.
Yeah, I'm not quite Penguin of Twitter, but one day maybe I'll get that big. Hello, everybody. Also, if you're listening on a podcast catcher or anything like that, do us a solid and head over to YouTube and subscribe anyway, even if you plan to listen to the show through your normal Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast catcher that you use, Spotify, whatever it is. We really, really appreciate you. We love you, but also do us a solid. Go to YouTube, subscribe. We're trying to grow our fan base over there, grow our subscriber base over there. And the more people who are subscribed to us, the more people we can be exposed to have other people subscribe to us. So if you would do that, we would love you forever. And that would be really, really, really cool.
Yeah, as one of the priests I had growing up would say, forever and ever.
Yes.
Yeah, I always love that. Let's talk about, before we get into anything, we were having a debate. First of all, if you watched our last show on Monday night, the end of the Monday night pod where it was our Fresno State wrap up, we were going through our rundown and of mailbag questions, and we got a question about us talking about off-topic stuff, and we talked about how we try to put that towards the end of the episode because that's usually what people sort of tends to be what people like at the end, because that way people who don't like it can sort of tune out at that point, and so forth. Slight exception. I'm going to break that rule right now because we were just having this conversation before we started rolling. And if we don't have it now, I'm going to forget it. You were on the TikToks and you saw a TikTok that said if you had one frozen lasagna, and you put a second frozen lasagna on top of it, would you have one or two lasagnas?
Well, it was really if you cooked two lasagnas and then took one of the lasagnas and put it on top of the other lasagna.
Yes.
Would you have one lasagna or two lasagnas? And I am very firmly in the camp of you have two lasagnas stacked. The analogy I used is if you cook two pancakes and then take one of those pancakes and put it on top of the other to create a stack of pancakes like the one I got from Norm's the other day, I have a stack of pancakes. I do not have a single pancake that is, 2 layers high. I have two pancakes. So if you are cooking a lasagna that is in its own container, that is cooked that way, and then you are removing it from that and stacking it on top of something else, you have a stack of lasagnas.
And I said that's a terrible analogy because
why not?
Pancakes are meant to be stacked. Lasagna in itself is a stack of pasta. But that's what it is. It's like a casserole stacked pasta.
Yes, but a casserole.
So if you add two of them, you just have one lasagna. The layers are slightly different than normal, but it's still one lasagna.
No, it's two lasagnas.
It's one lasagna. And then on top of this, you said your other analogy was a burger.
Because you said, but a pancake is like a one thing, like the lasagna is like a layered thing.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's fine. If you gave me two burgers and I took one of those burgers and just sat it right on top of the other burger and then tried to take a bite of that thing, I would not be taking a bite of one cheeseburger. I'm taking a bite of a stack of burgers. Like
it's two cheeseburgers.
No, it's two cheeseburgers. Yeah, it's two cheeseburgers that have been stacked on top of each other.
One.
No, it's not one cheeseburger.
Yes, it is.
It's two cheeseburgers.
When you order a Big Mac at McDonald's, do they say, here's your 1.5 burgers? No. They say, here's your burger.
Yeah, but you're ordering a Big Mac. You are ordering a Big Mac. That burger is designed as it is with an extra bun in the middle. The bun is part of the layering of that burger.
Yes, and that's what the two hamburgers on top of each other would be.
Because two hamburgers are their own separate entity. The Big Mac is not two hamburgers stacked on top of each other. The Big Mac is a bottom bun, a patty, a middle bun, a patty, and then a bun top. What we're talking about right here is you're taking
it's an extra bun,
patty, bun, bottom bun, patty, bun. You're making two burgers. It's two burgers that have been stacked.
It's one thing.
It's two.
It's one thing.
It's two.
Anyways.
This is what her apartment sounds like 90% of the time.
I know. Let's look at the chat. E. Castro says, one lasagna with lots of layers. Yes, thank you.
Cameron comes in with two lasagnas.
Yes. Yeah.
Steve Unger tries to say you take a 2-layer cake on top of put a 2-layer cake on top of another and you have one tall cake. No.
Exactly. That's Steve has it exactly right.
No,
exactly right.
Because what you have when you're layering a cake, you have your cake layers that you have cooked in their pans or whatever, and then processed together in a way that you're going to layer your cake. So when you layer a cake, for instance, you do cake and then you do layer frosting to stick, and then cake and then layer frosting to stick, and then cake. And then when you are completing said cake, you take your frosting and you go around it and you do a full round layer of frosting. If you did that to two different cakes, you do cake completed and then took that other cake and stuck it on top of the other cake, you would have two cakes stacked on top of each other. They are two completed cakes that have been stacked.
The correct answer is one cake, one lasagna. And Tim in the chat says, I agree with Alicia, but my Italian wife says one big lasagna. Then it sounds like a messy endeavor. Just get a deeper pan and make it with more layers. No,
Tim,
that's fair.
I agree. Fair. Yeah, Tim, exactly. If you wanted a taller lasagna, then get a deep enough lasagna pan to make it happen.
Yes. Cemetery is exactly right. I agree with Michael, because lasagna in of itself is a layered dish, which means if you stack it, it becomes more layers, so it can't pick a side.
But he started that by saying, I'm cursed to understand both sides of the story, because she is right that if you take one thing out of its container, put it on top of another thing, then you get two lasagnas. Racer X says two lasagnas. Thank you, guys.
All right.
It's two lasagnas. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to eat two lasagnas stacked on top of each other, I'm not going to stop you. Just don't tell me it's one lasagna.
All right. The one thing is for sure, there's one football game on Saturday, USC and Oregon State, and this is a preview pod. So let's get into that before we start
we get in trouble
hemorrhaging our
viewers,
our viewers here. But thanks as always for everyone hopping in the chat and everything. And again, be sure to like and subscribe us here on YouTube and wherever you get our pod. Alicia, there's a lot of news to get to, so let's just start right there. We will begin with the breaking news that USC is down a man at wide receiver, and that is Gary Bryant Jr. It was announced yesterday that he is going to be redshirting. This is an interesting development. I mean, going into the season, we talked about it. Where was Gary Bryant Jr. going to fit in relation to everybody else? Because there's a lot of dudes. There's a lot of dudes in USC's receiving core. There's Jordan Addison and Mario Williams and Terrell Bynum and Taj Washington and 80 other different dudes on this roster. And where were they all going to fit in relation to each other? And Gary Bryant Jr. is now redshirting after 3 games. Alicia, what does this mean? If you're redshirting at this point, what does that mean?
Well, obviously he wants to preserve a year of his eligibility. So that's the sort of black and white of it. He wants to preserve a year of his eligibility. Now the question is, why does he want to preserve a year of his eligibility? And that could have several different answers. He could have something going on in his personal life that he needs to put more focus in than football. He could have something he could be injured, and we don't know about it, and he needs to protect his eligibility because of an injury. I think a lot of people are on social media and elsewhere are also considering the possibility that he could be intending to transfer. He hasn't gotten a lot of looks in the first 3 games. Certainly, we saw him on special teams, I think, against Fresno State, but not a ton elsewhere. He's clearly pretty low on the pecking order of the receivers. So he could be redshirting with an eye on transferring and having an extra year to work with at whatever school he might end up at next. So the transfer question is going to be one that we won't get an immediate answer to because the new NCAA regulations have created transfer portal windows. And I believe the first one opens in December. So he will have to sort of sit tight here until we get to December, and then we find out, is there a possibility of him still staying at USC, or is this pretty much done and he's going to consider his options elsewhere? So that's where USC's at with him, which is a little. I mean, if that's the case, it's a bummer because you want to see guys succeed, But and we've talked about how USC is going to be losing Jordan Addison, and I believe Terrell Bynum is also only has the 1 year of eligibility. So the receiving core will take some hits next season, and there will be more openings for players to contribute. But we don't know what his deal is, or don't want to speculate too much, and we'll basically just see where he goes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all comes together. Gary Bryant Jr. had a lot of hope for this season. Won't be the case now that he's redshirting, but you can always remember the big plays that he put together. SC beats UCLA in 2020 because Gary Bryant Jr. had that long return to set up the final touchdown. So remember that, if anything, about Gary Bryant Jr. at this point. So we'll see more as it goes on. There is other news to talk about, including injuries. We got a little bit of an injury update, not only about SC, but Oregon State too. Both teams going into the game on Saturday. For the Trojans, let's start talking about Raleek Brown, USC's running back who got banged up after the Rice game. He has played in the 2 subsequent games against Stanford and Fresno State, but Lincoln Riley said that Raleek Brown will have a, quote, significant role once he's fully back from the ankle injury. Last 2 weeks, really, in the run game have all been about Travis Dye and Austin Jones.
Yeah, so I think this one is telling because, you have to take whatever injury updates you can get from Lincoln Riley at this point. And the fact that he's talking about how Raleek Brown will have a significant role down the line says everything about where Raleek is in terms of the injury and how he's feeling. So clearly the step back in touches for him has been more injury related than pecking order related. And when we start to see Raleek Brown take the field and get more of a focal point role in this offense is basically when we will know that he is 100% fully healed up from that injury. So for now, that sort of tracks with what I had been thinking. And I think that it's a situation where he did have an ankle injury. And from my experience with watching football over the years, guys who have ankle injuries, whether they're sprains or strains or, twists or whatever, it usually takes, a handful of weeks before you start to see them looking like their old selves. So we're now, how many, 2.5 weeks out?
Yeah,
from that first injury.
Game, yeah.
I would expect another couple of weeks before he really gets back to going. And I support the idea of maybe, not trying to pressure him too much. Ideally for me, if he can be a game breaker for USC by the time the Utah game rolls around, then things will have gone really well in terms of getting him ready to go.
Yeah, 100%. It helps here that SC has Travis Dye and Austin Jones.
Yeah, who have looked great.
Who sort of had we talked about it last week, right?
Yeah.
This past podcast that they averaged 9.5 yards on first down.
Yeah. They've made it very easy to, not that you would forget about Raleek Brown, but very easy to not be panicking about like, oh no, USC really needs Raleek Brown back. Right now, that's not the pressure because Dye and Jones look so good that I think what this really means is we have something really exciting to look forward to in a couple weeks when he gets full go, because he was very exciting to watch in that first game.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, raising the anticipation here.
Yeah, 100%. The run game was super heavy for USC in the second half against Fresno State, in part because of injuries at left tackle. Bobby Haskins started. He was a big reason why he was starting was because Cortland Ford was out. But Haskins had to leave the game at one point. Mason Murphy came in. Well, we've got an update from Lincoln Riley that both of them were full participants on Tuesday ahead of the Oregon State game. So that looks good for SC because you need to have everybody ready for a big road test like is on the docket this week in Corvallis.
Yeah, players who don't practice often don't play. And the fact that they are practicing doesn't guarantee that they will be good to go come Saturday, but it certainly is a step in the right direction, certainly is cause for taking a sigh of relief and saying, okay, so the worst case scenario that we talked about on Monday about, well, what do you do if neither of those guys are available? Do you move Andrew Voorhees over or Jonah Monheim over? Do you go full in with Mason Murphy? All of those sort of scenarios that we had to discuss, I think you can sort of put those on the back burner and trust that one of those two guys, if not both, will be able to suit up and play for USC. And that's a huge, huge plus going into a game that, we're going to talk about it later, but this game is very much going to come down to those kinds of areas of the game where Oregon State needs to create some chaos, and USC needs to limit the chaos in this game. And having the left tackle position be up in the air would certainly be a potential chaos area for USC to have to worry about. And so that's a big, big plus to have this news coming out of Tuesday practice at least.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about the Beavers injuries. Tight end Luke Musgrave is going to be out. He's been a big component of the Beaver offense this far. Led the team with 5 catches for 80 yards against Fresno State in their win a couple weeks ago. So far this season, 11 catches, 169 yards, and a touchdown out of the tight end position. Really came on big later in the year last year in the game that is no longer called the Civil War, and I don't know what they're calling it at this point, against Oregon. 7 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. So anytime that you can avoid not having to play a big stud at tight end, that is a benefit for SC, but obviously you want Oregon State at full strength nonetheless.
Yeah, so he missed the Montana State game as well. Yeah. But in those first 2 games, he was absolutely a critical part of their offense. And his backup, Jake Overman, is a guy that will have a lot of questions around him. He I believe he played against Montana State, didn't have a catch. They ended up he didn't start. They ended up starting three wide receivers, and then Jack Coletto, the linebacker, all-purpose running back, former quarterback guy, ended up starting that game. So it could be a situation where they might rely less on the tight end because he's not there than if Luke Musgrave was in there to give them that option. They're going to have to get a little bit more creative, unless they were maybe just sort of holding back and want to unleash Jake Overman on USC coming up this week. You never know. They were playing an FCS school, although albeit, a good one. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Jake Overman, 2 career catches, 1 in 2020, the COVID season, and 1 in 2022, which is last week against Montana State. So, we'll see how that comes together in the passing game for Chase Nolan and the Beavs. The other injury guy to note is running back Trey Lowe. What's up with Trey Lowe over at Oregon State?
Yeah, he also missed the Montana game. He also, according to Jonathan Smith, will not be in this game. He's actually, if I remember correctly, he's only played 1 game this year. He was the 3rd leading rusher for Oregon State last year. So definitely a guy that they would like to have to beef up their running back core. The good thing for Oregon State is that they do have the running backs that have sort of gotten them here through 3 games. They have Deshaun Fenwick and Damian Martinez. So it's hard to say how much of a miss it is for them to not have Trey Lowe.
Right.
But certainly one less weapon for them on the ground is one less weapon for USC to worry about on the ground.
Yeah, 100%. Let's get into talk about this game. Saturday night, 6:30 p.m. on the Pac-12 network. It is going to be a interesting game. Reser Stadium getting renovated. It's like at minimum capacity at this point.
I think it's 25,000, which is half. Yeah. I think their capacity was somewhere between 45 and 50,000 in the past.
They redid the one side of it. What was that, like 15 years ago? I remember for the 2006 game, it was fully remodeled, that one side. They're now doing the press box side of the stadium. So the press box is going to be, from the pictures I saw, it looks like those modules that were like containers, like Connex boxes, that were at the Coliseum for the 2018 season. Like those are going to be in the same situation where like that's going to be like a temporary press box, and the whole press box side of Reser Stadium is getting completely rebuilt. So it's going to be interesting from that perspective. No word on the fog either, but this is a battle that is easily the best game in the Pac-12 this week. USC and Oregon State. Of course, it's on the Pac-12 network. We talked about it at length last week.
Of course.
Yep. It's for contractual reasons. You can only have 3 games on. You have to have at least 3 games on the Pac-12 network, and so for each team. And ESPN and Fox are kind of waiting to. They want to hold off and have maximize their USC games later on in the season, which is why they passed on this one, even though Oregon State is 3-0. They look really good. They've played against Boise State, Fresno State, and Montana State, who is the number 4 team in the country in FCS. So that is not a fake FCS team. That is not a pushover. That is not like playing the Citadel or inserts any other FCS school, Mercer College, that you want to besmirch. Like Montana State is a legitimate elite team at the FCS level. So three teams, 3 big wins. Oregon State's schedule in general is like the first 6 games are insane. I think they play Utah next week. Like it is a murderer's row, and they've started off 3-0 and look really good with Chance Nolan at quarterback.
Yeah, this team is the ultimate sort of mid-tier Pac-12 team. This is the you and I were talking with our buddy Kenny, and I think Saman was involved in the conversation too, about like how would you rank the tiers in the Pac-12 right now? And you sort of have your USCs and Utahs and your Oregons and Washingtons, and then like I think Washington State and Oregon State are both in a similar boat. They're good teams. Are they teams that are actually capable of contending for the Pac-12 title? And there'd be a lot of doubt on that front. But Oregon State is a good team, I think. I think it's safe to say they're still a program with natural limitations, I think, which might explain why Jonathan Smith hasn't like broken through for the 10-win season that we saw Mike Riley be able to do on occasion, but it was really occasions. So that's the tricky thing about this team when you're evaluating them is they're good. Are they great? I think you'd need time to sort of have them prove that to you. But it's still, there's a reason, people keep talking about, and Richard in the chat is saying, I've been hearing on the radio, Twitter, every news outlet that Oregon State is a dangerous contender. In my opinion, USC is going to slaughter the Beavers. I think that the reason you're hearing people talk about Oregon State as a danger to USC is because, and I think we've talked about this on a previous show, they're a good team and they will be at home. And the recipe for upsets usually begin with a good or decent team at home. Yeah. And I think that is really the trick here is you cannot take a team like Oregon State lightly. That doesn't mean that you should lose to Oregon State. You should still be able to beat Oregon State. But football is weird and these things happen. And this is why there's sort of an upset alerty sort of feel to this. And it's not just because of Corvallis, but certainly Corvallis plays a role. But again, Why did USC lose to Oregon State in Corvallis when they lost to Oregon State and Corvallis as top 10 teams? Because again, it goes back to the formula for upsets. Mike Riley, his Oregon State teams were good/decent
Well
teams,
coached.
well coached. When you're at home, good teams at home pull off upsets. So the equation, the formula is present for this game. So that's why we're going to have to, look at it from the preview, look at it from the lens of, yes, this is an upset worry game.
Yeah, 100%. And in college football, these are the games that elite teams struggle in, right? Like the tough road games. And if it was college basketball, you'd probably just assume this is going to be a loss given all those circumstances. It's not college basketball, it's football. And it's one of those things where you assume this might be difficult, but still would put your eggs in the basket of the better team, which is, I think we all agree at this point, is USC. But Oregon State looks like they're going to be a contender in the Pac-12. I was going to say the Pac-12 North, but we know that there's no more divisions. But 3-0, and I think a legitimate 3-0 team. Like I said, like this
is not 3-0 beating cupcakes. They
didn't take a week off.
No, these are. I mean, even the FCS team that they played is not a doormat of a team.
Right.
And then you're playing, your G5 schools that you're playing are Boise State and Fresno State. Those are legitimate programs.
It's like the two best G5s you could get.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they played essentially three Mountain West teams. And if we're going to say that Montana State is worthy of being ranked, worthy of being considered not just your FCS pushover. And they scored 68 points against Montana State last week. But you look at Oregon State, and I'm trying to compare them to the last two opponents that SC has faced, Stanford and Fresno State. And in a way, they're an amalgamation of both of them, but on the best side of both of them, right? Like we've talked about Stanford and how Stanford has just been up and down the last few years, particularly down. Weren't good last year, but they throttled SC and absolutely murdered SC. Well, you look at SC, last year was murdered by Oregon State just the same way, almost to a T, if not more so, because SC didn't have the late rally attempt against Oregon State like they did against Stanford, sort of, kind of in the fourth quarter last year. And Oregon State is going to beat you with the ground game. They're going to be able to have a conservative passing game. It's not going to be as flashy as, say, Fresno State, in the sense that Jake Haener is, I think, a much better quarterback than Chance Nolan is. And you look at the numbers, that bears out when you look at Nolan's 62.7 completion percentage, not the same as Jake Haener. He's thrown 2 interceptions so far this year. Jake Haener had 0 going into the game last week. So, like, this is a situation where I think the star players individually might not be on the level as, say, Jake Haener was, but collectively, I think Oregon State's a better team than Fresno State. Collectively, Oregon State is a much better team than Stanford, and SC gets them on the road. All told, with everything there, this is the game you worry about, and this is the game why in the beginning of the season I predicted SC to lose. And I want to say, was your predicted first loss of the season for SC at Oregon State?
Yeah. My prediction was,
so both of us predicted
Oregon State,
going into the season that this would be the loss. Well, here we are, through 3 games, 3-0, both teams. Do you feel the same way? But before we get into predictions, like, just do you feel the same way? Like, this is a game that you feel the same way about that?
I don't. My
Why?
perception about this game has changed considerably. I was really looking at the Fresno State game as like the game that was going to lay the foundations for how I was going to look at the second phase of USC's season. And I just came away from the Fresno State game feeling impressed. I've said all along that the offense is further along and more powerful even than I expected this early in the season. I thought they would take them a little while to gel, and they have not needed a second to gel. The playmakers on this team are just even better than I imagined in the best case scenario. And then the situation with the defense, while nervy, while worrying, while the defense is certainly the reason why I will say that Oregon State has a chance in this game, I also think that what they were able to accomplish against Fresno State went a long way to ease my mind a little bit about the defense. I think that Oregon State has a better offense than Fresno State, but not by that much. Like they don't outclass Fresno State in terms of what they do on offense. And I think that what we saw from the defense and what we have seen from them is getting better, even if it's marginally better week to week. So I'm going into this week 4 thinking, you know what, the defense is going to take another little nudge forward, maybe even a step forward, and be able to handle this Oregon State offense in a way that I don't think that I would have been able to say that after the Rice game or even the Stanford game. So I am feeling more comfortable about this game. When I say that I'm more comfortable at this game, that doesn't mean that I'm not still circling this as an upset special. I'm just a little less willing to pick the upset at this point.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, I talked about all the preview about how I thought SC was going to have growing pains under Mike Riley, Lincoln Riley, at the beginning of the season, and that they were going to get through those and be a very good team at the end of the season, and start off with question marks, just like every team has when you bring in a new coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that defensively, you absolutely see those. There's absolutely question marks on this defense. They're not infallible. And Alex Grinch is the defensive coordinator through 3 games has not been perfect. And I wasn't expecting them to be perfect through 3 games, but I think they've gotten slightly, we've seen signs of improvement, particularly in the second halves of games in each of those 3 games. And I think that through 3 games in year 1 of a new system is fine. I think that's totally fine. Offensively, SC is far way past what my expectations were for them to be in the first month of the season. And when you put that together, it gets to this situation where what does it go like last week? I think what impressed me the most about SC is that when everything wasn't going so perfectly on offense compared to how it was against Stanford, where it was the explosiveness of the offense and they were driving down the field. You had the one play, 75-yard drive and the long pass to Jordan Addison. You weren't getting any of those last week. Fresno State's defensive game plan I thought was great. Kept everything in front of you. They dropped back. They try to take away the deep ball, and they did that. And SC really didn't take that many deep shots, right? They went more methodically. They had to kind of slow it down. They played a grinded out game on offense, and you saw them win in a completely different way. And that, to me, is something we haven't seen in years. We haven't seen this like a USC team that has been able to go back and forth. We've seen grinded out USC offenses in the past decade, and we've seen explosive USC offenses in the past decade. We haven't seen a team that can go back and forth between weeks dependent on the game. We've seen that so far this year, and I think that through 3 games in a new system, I think that is a sign of maturation that is telling. And I think that is a reason why I think that it's super hard to say anything about SC that it's super hard to legitimately say that they could lose any game when they have that ability. And at this point, you need to give them the benefit of the doubt, particularly on offense. It comes down to the defense. And when you look at everything in terms of like available yards, and available yards I talked about in our last episode, of course, I'll explain it really quickly. If you start at the 20, you have 80 available yards to gain. And SC last week was gaining 100% of those yards on offense routinely because they were touchdown drives. But they've given up a bunch of those yards defensively. There's a reason now that SC is ranked 4th nationally in available yards offensively. Defensively, it's 80th. And you put those together and net available yards, SC is still 14th. And I think that them being 14th shows just how good the offense is in that net, because the offense is that great that even it balances out where the 80th ranked defense in available yards still nets out to 14th when you include the offense.
Yeah.
And that balance for me makes it very difficult to pick against SC in this. Even if I think all the telling signs are, if this was any team, super objectively, you're not looking at the names of the teams and all that stuff. Like this feels like a game on the road where the 3-0 team that probably should be ranked, and they would be ranked if this was an SEC team, by the way. The Oregon State was Kentucky. Mind you, Kentucky beat Florida, so take that for what it's worth. But
Yeah.
if Oregon State was in the SEC, they'd be ranked right now. They're
Even
not.
I think
but they should be.
If Oregon State was just not in the Pac-12 right now, they should be ranked straight up.
Right.
If people were paying attention to Oregon State, if USC had swapped brands with Oregon State and beat Boise State and Fresno State and Montana State as their first 3 games, Oregon State's would be ranked under these circumstances. I just think this is Oregon State not getting respect, which is unfortunate because a ranked matchup then you feel a little bit better about calling this upset special when number 25 or 24 Oregon State is who you're playing. Instead, you're playing a team that's getting votes in the polls but not getting the ranking in the poll that I think they deserve and won't get if they don't beat USC. But that's just sort of part of it. But
yeah, I think we agree that the case for beating USC for any team at this point is to win in a shootout, because SC's offense theoretically at this point, until proven wrong, is too good not to at least get you to a shootout.
But it's a very particular kind of shootout. It's the same thing that I said about Fresno State. I don't think you can beat USC in a 65 to 55 shootout. Like if you're scoring in the 50s or 60s or even 40s, you're in trouble in that shootout because that means USC's offense is rolling. But there is such thing as like a 38 or 41 point shootout where both teams are putting up points, and then when they don't put up points because they did something sloppy. Like if turnovers are the story of this game, like if it's just suddenly chaos, then that's the shootout that Oregon State could win.
Yeah.
But the problem that I see here for Oregon State, and this is going to be the question we're going to be asking sort of this whole time, is Oregon State is good enough to maybe push USC. Are they good enough to beat USC? And you look down the personnel, and I don't know that I see enough there to make me think there are like game breakers to keep up on offense while also causing enough chaos on defense to completely fluster the Trojan offense on the other side. Like we talked, like Chance Nolan, he's a good game manager. Like he manages the game. He torched USC last year.
Yeah.
So like he obviously can get the job done. They have 2, good running backs, but they don't have BJ Baylor, who was their top running back last year.
Mm-hmm.
They have Trayshawn Harrison, decent receiver. Tyjon Lindsey is still in college and playing for Oregon State. Hasn't done a lot this year, but that's a name that USC fans might recognize. And they have an offensive line that returns 3 starters from last year. They're all pretty much getting preseason all Pac-12 recognition. The left tackle and the right guard got second team recognition. So like they have a basis there on offense.
Yeah.
But you need something special to.
But here's where I'll push back. The thing is they're not playing in a vacuum, and USC's offense is not like in a vacuum. USC's offense much better than Oregon State's offense. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. I think you take probably just about every starter on USC's roster on offense, you take them over Oregon State's 100%. We all agree. Oregon State people would absolutely agree. Jonathan Smith's going to agree. Everyone agrees, right? But that's not what the game is. The game is, what is Oregon State going to do against USC's defense? And what is USC going to do against Oregon State's defense?
Well, I have a rebuttal.
Hold on.
Okay.
When you look at SC's defense, giving up, and they're 80th in the country in available yards allowed, and they just played a game against Stanford 2 weeks ago on the road, the only road game that they've played thus far, And if it wasn't for 2 red zone turnovers that they got in that game, you can make the argument that they lose that game despite the offense being completely infallible in the first half. I think that it's hard to say that there's not enough playmakers on this team to beat SC. There is, because they're playing USC's defense, which is not infallible.
Yes, but USC's offense is also playing Oregon State's defense, and this is not a particularly great defense.
I agree.
Which is the problem. Like, Oregon State is better than they were a couple years ago when they had the worst defense that anyone has seen.
We haven't seen SC turn the ball over yet.
Yes, but
that's not going to be the case the entire season.
But also, even if you turn the ball over, if you are absolutely just scoring at will, you need to turn the ball over a lot for it to be something that counterbalances going the other way. So here's my problem with Oregon State. Like I said, their defense is not as terrible where they were ranked in the 120th and everything a couple years ago when we had to preview. But they're vulnerable. They gave up 492 yards to Fresno State. They gave up 6.5 yards per play to Fresno State.
Yeah.
They ranked 71st in rushing yards per carry last year. They ranked 93rd in passing defense last year. They ranked 66th in passing defensive passer rating last year. They ranked, and this is the one that I think is going to be, circle it and remember it while you're watching the game. They ranked 127th in third down conversion defense last year. They gave up 50.3% of the third downs that they faced last year. They couldn't get off the field. And they haven't considerably gotten better because against Boise State, they did hold them to 4 of 13, but they still gave up 6 of 14 to Fresno State. I think that there's still a 50-50 on third down kind of defense. I don't know that they have the ability to get off the field against this USC team, against this USC offense, unless it rains and people drop footballs and crazy stuff happens, which I always have to account for because I watch enough college football
for sure
to know that it does rain and it does get windy and that people do drop passes inexplicably and there is chaos, and that's why we love college football. But I think when you're going into this game, you also have to realize that the matchups here don't necessarily favor Fresno State. If you say, okay, how many points? Oregon State. How many points better than USC's defense is Fresno State's offense capable of Oregon State's offense capable of being? I don't know that number is bigger than how many points better USC's offense is capable of being against Oregon State's defense. And again, I want to be fair to Oregon State. They have a couple all Pac-12 preseason guys like the nickelback Jaden Grant. He was third team all Pac-12 last year. He had 2 interceptions and 6 PBUs and 2 forced fumbles and 3 tackles for loss. He's a guy that you got to watch out for. He plays. Omar Spates, their leading linebacker, he plays. He had 89 tackles, 5 tackles for loss last year, 2 interceptions, 1 pass breakup, 2 QB hurries. He's everywhere on the field. The cornerback Rajon Wright last year, 52 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, 8 pass breakups, 2 quarterback hurries, 1 forced fumble. So there are some havoc guys. There are some guys who are creating turnovers. This defense does create turnovers. They have 8 turnovers through 3 games. So there are potentially those areas for things to go wrong for USC. But there are also areas where they have to go wrong for USC if Oregon State wants a chance in this. And I think that's why I'm sort of looking at it and thinking this is danger zone. USC has to take this seriously.
Yeah.
But if USC plays a clean game, that's my big sort of takeaway from this game. If USC plays clean, that means for me on defense, keep guys in front of you. If Oregon State's going to score, make them go on long drives. Just make them go on long methodical drives. Don't let them rip off, 50-yard plays and beat you that way.
Right.
Force them to be perfect on offense. And going the other way, just take care of the ball. Take care of the ball. Don't give Oregon State opportunities for chaos plays if you can help it. And on special teams, cover your kicks. That's it. Just cover your kicks. Don't let this game become about chaos. If USC does that, I think they win comfortably.
Yeah, the way I look at this, if SC plays their potential, they cover the spread and win by a couple touchdowns.
Hey, if USC plays to their potential, they blow them out. I think
they win by what, 20?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
If Oregon State wins by their plays up to their potential, they win the football game. Comparatively the same way, right? The difference is SC playing their potential wins in a sizable manner,
USC
and
playing,
Oregon State wins in a very close game.
Here's
and
the problem.
The reality is, where does the line in the middle is? You split the difference on that, and that's SC still winning the game.
But the equation is still Oregon State playing to 100% of their potential beats USC if USC has played to less than 50% of their potential. But if USC plays to 75% of their potential and Oregon State plays 100% of their potential, then USC, I think, still wins. Like this is the equation that USC's in.
I'm just saying that, like, going into this game assuming SC's winning in a blowout.
No, I don't think you.
Stupid.
No, anyone who thinks USC's winning in a blowout, I love your confidence. But this is still a long road trip up north where I just looked up the weather. It's not going to be bad. It's going to be, it looks like there's like 2% chance of rain. Shouldn't be heavy clouds or anything. Like, it's not going to be inclement weather or anything like that, but it's still the Pacific Northwest. You don't know what's going to go on there. I think if you go into this game thinking that USC is going to roll and expect that to happen, you might be disappointed.
Yeah.
But I also don't think you need to go into this game thinking like, oh, USC is going to
there's a middle ground.
It's going to get humbled by Oregon State. I think that it's always best to come in with the middle ground of Oregon State might make this very difficult for USC. And if USC doesn't stay on their P's and Q's, then Oregon State will be capable of upsetting USC. That is 100% there.
I think we can, before we get to the over-under, I think we summarize this all, and let's see if we agree on these little points.
Yeah.
A, Oregon State is capable, if things fall their way, of beating SC.
Yes.
Agree? B, if SC plays their potential, they're absolutely capable of winning this big.
Yes.
Right? And the reality of this is a dress rehearsal for the Utah game. In 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Can you handle being on the road?
And because it's a dress rehearsal for the Utah game, which is a more difficult opponent, you need to prove that you can play in this game.
Yeah.
And this is the toughest of the 4 games that SC has played thus far. They've all kind of ramped up in difficulty a bit in different ways.
It's been a step, and that's the nice thing about this start is it really has been a little bit harder, a little bit harder, a little bit harder. Next week, it's going to not follow that pattern anymore. But like, this has been a really interesting first 4 games because you are checking off boxes and you are raising your difficulty. It's like a video game where it's like every boss you play is slightly harder than the last boss you played.
Yeah. And then ASU comes to town.
Yeah.
All right. Alicia, let's get into some over, under, and make some picks. Last week, all told, our record after last week was 15-10. Your record was 15-10. Mine was 11-14. So let's make some lines that allow me to win, okay? Please. What's your first one?
All right. I've got 5.5 Oregon State rushes of 10+ yards. So USC ranked 97th in long rushing plays allowed. They've let 17 rushes of more than 10 yards happen this year. They're 125th with 5 rushes allowed of 30+ yards.
Yeah.
So small sample size, but 125th is not where you want to be in any statistical category. Basically, USC is averaging 5.66 rushing plays of 10+ yards per game. Oregon State is not like exceptionally explosive. They are less explosive than they were last year with BJ Baylor. They've had 20 rushes of 10+ yards, 2 rushes of 30+ yards this year. They're averaging 6.6 rushes of 10+ yards per game this year. So I'm setting that line at 5.5 Oregon State rushes of 10+ yards.
5.5. That feels like a lot.
but we've seen USC's rushing
Yeah,
defense.
like it
yeah.
give me the over.
Okay.
Yeah, give me the over there. Feels like a lot, but also that, I mean, 6 to get it. I don't know. That's a good line.
This will be interesting too, because I'm very curious to see what Grinch, like the chess match in this game, because I think that USC could go into this game thinking like we're just gonna go all out to stop the run, but we've seen that Oregon State can pass on you like that. That's where they were beating USC with passes and with sweeps and with sort of misdirection plays in the backfield.
I really want to see what they do with those, because we know SC is susceptible to misdirection, and the fly sweeps they absolutely killed SC on last year. Obviously, it's a different team, different defense, but a lot of the same personnel.
Yeah. And a similarly, I mean, Alex Grinch doesn't have the same defense as Todd Orlando, but they are not drastically different in terms of the philosophical defense that they're fielding. So
yeah, I'm gonna regret that over taking the over. Mostly because, like, if fly sweeps were included in that, I'd feel better about it. Fly sweeps, technically, I think counted as a pass.
We might have to have a stupid statistical bad beats conversation again next week.
Yeah. Okay, my first over/under is 177.5. That's Oregon State rushing yards. This line is perfect because
I love it.
177.5 Oregon State rushing yards. Why? Because Oregon State has rushed for exactly 178 against both of their FBS opponents, Boise State and Fresno State. They had 214 last week against Montana State. And SC is allowing 177 yards per game on the ground. So 177.5, split the difference. Oregon State's average, USC's average, 177.5 rushing yards for Oregon State. What do you got?
By the way, they had against Boise State and Fresno State, they had identical rushing lines. They had 178 yards, average 4.8 yards per carry, and had 37 carries. So just point that out. Consistency. Yeah. So this one, I am inclined to take the over on this, because I'm inclined to always take the over when we're talking rush defense until that changes. But I got burned last week because of the sack thing. You have listed here that Oregon State's only allowed 2 sacks.
Yeah.
This is an offensive line that has been pretty stout. So I don't know that, USC could come out with a 5-sack game as well. I don't know. I'm still going to go over, but I am going to be worried about another bad beat on the, it feels like they gave up 200 yards rushing, but the stat sheet says 175.
All right. This is going to be interesting because you take the over on the rushing yards, but the under on the chunk plays.
Yeah.
So we might end up splitting that, or maybe it works out. I don't know. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
What's your next one?
All right. I've got 0.5 USC turnovers. So it's pretty simple, straightforward. USC has gone 3 games without a turnover. Oregon State is +8 in turnovers. They have 6 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries. For the record, they have lost 3 turnovers this year, so their turnover margin is 5. But they are creating turnovers in a way that, like, Fresno State came in not being able to create that many turnovers. So will USC get to 4 games without a turnover?
No, I think that 4 is a lot. SC has not had 4 in a row since I believe 2014. Yeah,
I was tempted to make it 1.5 to just make it interesting, but I kind of want to just go with the cleanliness of the 0. I think there's a good chance that USC has a turnover in this game, but we have seen USC protect the ball fairly well, so we'll see if Caleb can get it done for me.
All right, next one. Over under 49.5% field position rate for USC. This means the percentage of plays USC runs on the Oregon State side of the 50. USC ran 49% of their plays in Stanford territory and 65% of their plays in Fresno State territory. So 49.5. Can they get to 50% of their plays in Oregon State territory? USC, again, 4th in available yards, which means 89%. They're getting 89% of their yards from the start of the drive until the opponent's 40-yard line, for reference. That's
This
pretty
is
good.
tough because so the rate is
Number of
related
plays
to plays,
on
not
the other
yards.
side of the 50. Yeah, not drives, not yards, the number of plays.
So like if USC was scoring like long, like if USC had a long touchdown run that was like 60 yards, then that wouldn't
it
count.
would be zero.
There
Yeah,
would be
if they
zero
scored on
plays.
only 75-yard touchdowns, that would be zero because they would have never technically crossed the 50 to run a play.
I'm gonna go over on this.
Okay.
I think there's a world where USC does have a situation where they're too explosive and they don't get this, but also like I could see USC being very explosive, but not explosive in the sense of getting into the end zone. Like I could like my first instinct is to say USC will like start at the 30 and then have a 20-yard play to get across the 50 and then have to more methodically move. So I'm gonna go over. Yeah.
Yeah, this is that. It's such a difficult line that I'm glad I'm not the one setting it.
Yeah.
So, or not the one
Picking
having
it.
to pick.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, my next one is 38.5 Oregon State third down percentage. So USC's defense is actually doing a very good job on third down statistically. That first game felt very bad at first, and there were times where it felt like USC hasn't been able to get off the field. But across the board, they're actually quite good with 33.3% conversions allowed on third down. Stanford has the season high so far with 38.45, which is why I set the line at 38.5. Oregon State is averaging 45.7% on third down, but that is helped extremely much, a lot, by the Montana State game where they had 83.3% conversions on third down. Against Boise State, they had 30.7. Against Fresno, they had 20. They were a good third down team last year. They've been a little bit more of a struggle bus in the FBS games they've played this year. So will USC's defense be able to get off the field?
38.5% Oregon third down percentage. I usually tend to think that like 40% is usually the given there. Oregon State at home, does that give them the edge to get to that 40%? Stanford being at 38.45 makes it...
The tricky thing here is that we've seen from USC's defense that in the first half, they're letting third downs go a lot. But in the second half, they've really clamped down. Now, part of that is they're getting stops, key stops. Part of that is other teams are pressing. It's tricky.
You know what? Give me the under.
Okay, I'm going
under.
Give
me the under. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like I'm trying to line things up here, and I think the under might line up with what my score prediction is going to be.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Last over under from me is 150.5 combined penalty yardage for both teams. SC is 103rd in penalty yards per game, 71.3. Oregon State is 117th in penalty yardage per game, 76.7. A reminder that only bad teams commit penalties is bullshit. And this is Pac-12 After Dark at 6:30 on the Pac-12 Network. Things are going to get nuts, you know. So 150.5 combined penalty yardage.
I may regret this because 150 combined is quite a lot. And you could have a situation where like USC has like 120 penalty yards, but for whatever reason, Oregon State doesn't get hit. But I'm still going over on this, big over, smash the over button, just because it's Pac-12 After Dark. It is USC. It is Pac-12 refs. And yeah.
All right. Let's buckle up. Roll your sleeves up.
Yeah.
Let's go to we're gonna pull out an over under from the chat from Alex, who says over under USC allows 20.7 points for the entire game. So say 20 and a half, I think works.
Okay.
Right?
20
we can go 20.7. It might be a little funny, right?
Okay, we'll go 20.7 points that USC allows
for the entire game. Over under.
Oh, I'm taking the over. My prediction will reveal why.
Yeah, I'm taking the over as well. I think
Hey,
Oregon State scores some points.
They held Fresno State to 17, so we know they can do it. They could replicate the performance they had against Fresno State, and then we're going to give them all the praise in the world. I'm just not going to bet on it. So,
all right, let's get to game predictions. Let's talk about the Bill Connolly numbers. Has SC winning 31-28, 59% win rate. The Vegas line, what's the Vegas line at right now?
minus 6.5.
6.5. Okay.
Not minus 65, as I had in
say it's minus 65 in the rundown. I'm like, it's definitely not 65. Yeah, which you do the math with the over-under is 38-32, which that seems not terrible.
Mm-hmm.
What's your prediction? USC and Oregon State Saturday night.
All right, I am going USC 45, Oregon State 35. I think USC covers. I think Oregon State scores, but I think they can't keep up with USC's offense in the grand scheme against that defense. I think it maybe gets a little bit nervy, wild in the second quarter and starts to make things feel like scary. I think USC gets a 10-point cushion by the third quarter, and they do that thing where Oregon State never gets closer than 2 scores.
Okay. I could see it. Absolutely. I think my prediction is not too dissimilar. And might end up playing out either way.
Mm-hmm.
I see this game as a very close game for a lot of it, at least in terms of the eye test, right? Like both teams kind of having their way at times in terms of what they want to do offensively. The difference being here, I think everything that I look up when you look at Oregon State's offense, they are the number 1 team in the country in red zone offense. They score on every drive that they get into the red zone. They just don't get in the red zone a million times. SC gets into the red zone a million times, which is part of the reason why SC's score rate is not perfect, because they get in the red zone a million times. What was the difference last week in the Fresno State game? Fresno State got to the red zone 4 times, only scored once. I think Oregon State's going to be a little bit better in the red zone, and that's going to allow them to stay in this game longer. They score on fewer number of total drives than SC does. SC adds a field goal in there, wins by a field goal, 38-35. Oregon State covers at home in a wild, crazy Pac-12 After Dark game that I think was going to be fun as hell to watch from a neutral perspective.
Yeah, but not from our perspective.
I genuinely don't know if this is like a late cover or this is SC pulling a rabbit out of the hat and winning the game outright at the end. I could see it either way. My gut is that it's a late cover for Oregon State here. But, yeah, I think it's going to be a great game that lives up to the hype of the upset potential and all that stuff, but SC still gets the win. So, there we go. Let's go to the mailbag. We got a long email from John who says, "Greetings, Michael and Alicia. Love your show and all the great information you provide. It's such an easy to listen format. Thank you for the shout out to the Trojan Marching Band. I love your use of the band music for the intro. USC football and the sounds of TMB are absolutely intertwined. It's one of the greatest packages in all of college football. I'm a small town Montana boy who came to USC for a master's degree in music education, marching with the TMB in 1980. Became a Trojan for life during the pregame show of our opening game against the University of South Carolina. I was in the middle of the field preparing to move into position as the band creates the big USC. We struck up the fight song. Traveler came shooting out of the tunnel, and 78,000 Trojan faithful let out a cheer of such volume and magnitude that I was stunned. I actually stopped marching for a couple beats and yelled, "Oh my gosh!" at the top of my voice. Fortunately, my squad leader brought me back up to my job by shouting, "Keep marching, keep marching." And for several more measures of music, I looked around at all the pageantry and was unable to play and barely able to keep my composure as I marched into position. I was transformed at that moment. From then on, I was given birth as a member of the Spirit of Troy and a full-on USC Trojan. It was great hearing that you two in particular are fans of the band, so I appreciate your work at Reign of Troy. By the way, I have a really cool tidbit of TMB information about our performance in Tusk. That'd be cool to know.
Hell yeah.
I'd be happy to tell you about it if you're interested. Thanks again for all your efforts and your wonderful podcast. Every show is listened to with great interest here in Big Sky Country. After my degree, I returned to Montana and finished a wonderful 42-year career in music education thanks to the amazing teaching provided by my alma mater. Fight on, John, class of 1981.
Yeah, thank you for that email, John. Number one, congratulations on your long career in music education. A big fan of teachers and also music teachers. Even though I was never musically talented, I've always felt that like those are the teachers that really inspire people to be creative and just sort of be like tap into those parts of themselves, which I really like. Your story about falling in love with USC is really relatable to me because I have like had like 10 of those moments of like the first time I walked through the tunnel to go into the Coliseum, like just through the tunnel that you go through as like as somebody in the audience, like walking out into the stadium in the audience. Yeah, the crowd was having trouble here. The crowd, like just that moment of like, oh, the first time I heard the Conquest with the people singing along at night under the lights in just like the aura of the Coliseum, just all of it. There's those moments. The first time I walked out from the tunnel while I was working on the field, like everything, you just feel it, and it continues to inspire and build that love for USC that we all have. So yeah, thank you for the email.
Yeah, it is a great email. Good to always hear the insights from the band and what that feels like. It's awesome, and hopefully that inspires you guys to also listening to be big fans of the band as well.
Yeah.
Let's go to a couple of YouTube comments that we got about a conversation we had in the last episode. This is about Hail Mary interceptions. So Anthony says, Hail Mary interceptions shouldn't count, in quotes. I have to disagree with this statement, particularly concerning Malcolm Epps' interception. Yes, he could have knocked down the pass, but Fresno State would have had a chance to catch it. That interception was not only a more secure stop, but extremely important. If SC doesn't make that stop, they go into the half up only 21-17, and Fresno State would have gotten the ball back at the beginning of the third quarter with a chance to take the lead. That interception absolutely should count, and it was not insignificant. Ted Idle comes in and says, facts. I don't understand how they don't see that interception was a big shift in tone for the rest of the game. Saying Hail Mary picks within the game shouldn't count is asinine, and knocking it down while in traffic can lead to other types of situations that could have went in Fresno State's favor. Alicia, I think I speak for both of us when I say that we fully agree on all of those things, right?
Yes, I think this is a case of some listeners hearing us say something in like in and then taking it out of context, and not on purpose, but I think that sometimes you just hear things and then your brain sort of runs with, but it was important for USC, when like that wasn't really what we were discussing. That wasn't really what we were meaning when we said that interception. Right. Like, it's really just like we were talking about statistical bad beats. Like, I wasn't thinking about it from the perspective of like USC's defense and how important it was for them. I was thinking from it of the perspective of, you and I do research every week into quarterbacks, and when we look and see, oh, last week so-and-so had an interception, that might change like our perception of how USC might go forward against that quarterback, without the context of knowing that that interception was a halftime Hail Mary that was heaved and put up for somebody to catch it. It didn't really matter who.
Yeah. And a halftime Hail Mary is, if we're talking about interceptions are indictments of a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of the level of indictment of an interception, a halftime Hail Mary is the least significant indictment of all time.
Yes.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about that as a quarterback. That's what I'm talking about. It shouldn't count for the quarter. Like, it's a bummer that it counts for the quarterback. Obviously, it should count in the game, and obviously, it was an important moment for how the game played out. And for Malcolm Epps, it's awesome that he got an interception and a touchdown in the same game. Yeah. That is the coolest thing ever, right? Yes. The only two times that it's happened since 1990 that you pointed out last week. So, yeah, that's awesome. But this is just our little gripe with statistics, and me talking about last week that I would love it if there were such things as earned interceptions and unearned interceptions, like runs in baseball, where a pitcher gives up runs but also unearned runs, and like the ERA is based on earned runs.
That's all we were talking about. Like, we get it. Sometimes things will be misunderstood, but we weren't trying to take anything away from the defense.
We might have misspoke.
It was a big moment for the defense. Like it really, I think it really galvanized the team going into halftime, and that matters. But we're talking purely like just nitpicky statistical stuff. So sorry.
Yeah. All right. We've been on for an hour and 11 minutes. Little inside baseball. We do racing on Wednesday nights. A little F1. What they changed the name of the game. It's F122 now.
Yeah,
right?
Whatever it is.
We're in a little racing league with a few of our friends. So we're going to do some rapid fire so we can go and finish our season. Tonight's the last race of the season. So really quick, we're going to run down through all these questions here in YouTube. So if we're running through these quickly and you want a fuller answer, maybe ask next time. We don't want to
shortchange you.
Yeah, shortchange you. But Josh says, "How does Oregon State have the manpower to slow down the USC passing attack?" That's what you mean by slow down.
I don't think they do. If Caleb is not putting the ball in dangerous spots.
Yeah. Fresno State slowed it down in the sense that they made SC not have to have the long bombs, but SC still scored touchdowns. So you know what I mean? So it could be in that sense, but not really. Oscar says, "How many turnovers will SC get?" I don't know. I think we're going to see in the game. Oregon State had turned over the ball 3 times against Boise State, but haven't in the last 2 games. Have to think each team might get a turnover. Anything beyond that is a question at this point.
If I had said an over-under of 0.5 for USC turnovers that they created on defense, I would take the over, but you just never know.
Yeah. Josh says, sick hat. Thank you. I like my hats, and it's an LAFC hat, which best LA logo there is. Certainly better than that blue logo. Yeah. SK says, does anyone know how Bobby Haskins is doing? We talked about he's in practice. I was able to practice this week for the Trojans, which is a good thing. Steven says, chicken wing preference, bone in or boneless, it matters.
Michael's going to upset some folks here, but I have the correct answer. It's bone in.
The answer is no chicken should ever be consumed with bone in. Bone in anything is disgusting. We're humans. We're not savages. So
that's a Michael food take.
No, it's not. Daniel says, if you stacked Clay Helton on top of Scott Frost, do the 2 stacked bad coaches, or is it one big bad coach?
This literally made me laugh early in the episode. If you go back and watch the start of the show and you see me randomly just like have to hold in a laugh, that's what I was laughing about. That's an outstanding question.
The answer would be one.
You would have 2 stacked 2 stacked coaches. Yes.
Josh says, who on Oregon State's offense is Grinch going to focus on the most? Probably one of the running backs.
I would focus on the run game.
Yeah. David says, why are you guys talking about OSU as if it's Bama or something? I don't think we're at all.
Guys, we're allowed to praise another team without it. We get this complaint like every week. So not to single you out, David, but also like it's the Oregon State preview. We're going to talk about the other team and what they do well, because what they do well is going to be the thing that's going to decide the game. So,
well, one of the known things about that, we get 2 types of feedback. We get the feedback, oh my God, you're making every team sound like Alabama. They suck. Or we get the feedback, like, in other words, we're having a negative viewpoint going into whatever it is. Or it's, did you see how bad USC's defense is? This team is terrible. You're ridiculous for being a sunshine pumper and all this, and talking about how good USC is. So, like, we get it from both sides, and it never makes any sense to me, because I think that for the most part, we're very objective and down the middle on most of these arguments. So
we can't please everyone.
We can't please everyone. That's how it is. Let's go to Hokey P, who says, Alicia, can you remind people to hit the bell so they get the notification you guys go live? Yes, hit the bell. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you have watched us this far, if you're one of the 84 people that are still on us right now, we will take 1 second for you to go down over there.
Somewhere in the vicinity.
Hit the subscribe. Okay, ready?
Hit subscribe.
There you go. Boom, you got it.
And then hit the bell so that you get notified when we go live.
Yeah.
So that you never miss these episodes.
Yeah, 100%. Joey says, forgive me for thinking ahead, but if USC beats Oregon State this week, would Washington State be considered a trap game? No, I do not mean ASU, because I think regardless, there is no way. Haha. Yeah, SC is not losing to ASU, and I think there's 2 games on the schedule that I might predict SC scoring 70 points. ASU is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not losing that game. I will drink a gallon of mustard on this podcast if SC loses to Arizona State.
But if USC beats Oregon State, especially if they beat Oregon State going away, and then they get to play ASU and they get to, just put up whatever statistical insanity points that they want to, would I look at Washington State, a team that is 3-0 right now, could be 4-0? I forget who they play, but I think they play Oregon. So, like, if they win this week or challenge Oregon, and USC is feeling good coming off that ASU game, and USC knows that Utah is coming up the week after, there's certainly look ahead potential there, let down, look ahead sort of situation. Yes. So, would I consider it a trap game if Oregon State is undefeated? I would, like semantics there. Like,
you mean Washington State?
Yeah, sorry, Washington State. But definitely a game that you cannot take as lightly as I think you might have at the start of the season, because Washington State looks decent.
If Washington State is undefeated at that point, having beaten Oregon, I think that, yes, you absolutely have to take them completely seriously.
Yeah.
Although, yes, I think it has the meanings of a trap game. I'm kind of apprehensive to have a trap game at home. I think of trap game on the road as being scarier. But remember when we talked about earlier this month about how the coaches who have won national championships in recent years, how they've all lost games in year one. They've all been at home.
Yeah.
So if SC is going to have that slip up, it could happen at home, because Nick Saban lost at home in year one. Ed Orgeron, lost a lot of games, but lost at home in year one at LSU. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Dabo Swinney lost at home at Clemson in year one. Like, that's just could happen. I don't know that I completely see Washington State to be that team, but maybe. Who knows? All right. Last question from Alex. Will Gary Bryant Jr. stop practicing with the team this season?
That I don't know that has been answered. They didn't say he was leaving the team. So for now, I think we have to assume he'd be practicing.
Yeah, 100%. Until we hear anything otherwise, that just is what it is. So, all right. That's going to wrap up this podcast. We will be back on Saturday, USC and Oregon State, 6:30 p.m., which means we'll probably be going live around like 10 o'clock or something. Whatever it is after the game, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Reign of Troy. Follow me individually, Michael Castep, Alicia individually, Penguin of Troy. And we'll let you know when we go live exactly after the game for our post-game CarCast. Be sure to subscribe.
Also,
and you will know when we go live as well.
Josh, number one, there is no universe where I will chug mustard if USC destroys the Beavers. That is not happening. No. Number two, as to your other question, we will hit you up on Slack about that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Till then, see ya.
See ya.
See ya.